Redditors who moved into a tiny house during the craze a while back, how's it going now? I moved into one, rented, long before the craze. Lived in it for 13 years. I saved a ton of money which allowed me to buy my own place in one of the most expensive markets in my country, Canada, but I wouldn't recommend it to most. I went stir crazy a lot. Any little thing someone buys you, there is never a place for it. You can't really host any dinners or anything. It was cute. I loved my landlords. I saved money, but never again. When the craze started I laughed. When I moved out my landlords could charge double cause of the craze and rental market. They probably colder got more, but they weren't greedy, but yay. Not again thank you. Because people have asked in the past here on Reddit. Here is an album of pictures, outside Flickr. Comforters in Daryl Asperg album 72157634378379537. Inside, it's smaller than these make it look. Flickr. Comforters in Daryl Asperg album 72157634382146505. Edit. Well, good morning to me. Thank you so much kind people for the platinum, gold, and silver. Thank you for the fun conversations too. We bought one to rent out, and then we got 30 days notice 3 days after it was delivered. We had to put most of our stuff in storage in the closest lot to where we were, was an hour drive away, and the middle of nowhere. This Christmas it will have been a year. I'm a 17-year-old, 16 when we moved, living with my single mother. The concept of living in a loft seemed cool to me, and I thought I would enjoy it. I didn't and don't. I hate it here. It may be because I have to drive about an hour to an hour and a half to school each day. It may be that I have to drive that distance to be with my friends. It may be that our internet at its fastest only allows me to watch YouTube in 144p, and it doesn't allow me to play video games anymore. It may be that I'm just an angsty teenager, but I hate it. Living in that close quarters with someone is enough to drive me crazy. I can hear her eat, sleep, sing, go to the bathroom, just everything. It's made me hate my only living relative. That's hard to do. TL. Doctor, don't do it. If you have kids, you'll drive each other crazy. I would recommend 2 different tiny houses, or one big enough to have rooms with doors. Edit. Thanks for all of your concerns. In August I will be moving to a dorm for college, so I will be counting the days until then XD. Till I learned my 500 square apartment is same size as a tiny house. Moved into a converted school bus about 4 years ago. It's going great. I pay about a quarter of what most of my peers pay to live in the Bay Area. My wife and I love the space. We moved after 8 months, lol. To be fair, it wasn't really, because of the small space, 300 square feet or so proper tiny house on wheels with a loft bed, kitchen, living room, bathroom plus shower. The space was doable, it was the lack of small but important luxuries like a functioning kitchen and bathroom, a dryer, things like that. Really though, we moved because of permits and the freaking compost toilet. We sold the tiny house after we realized we'd never be able to pay for a foundation slab permit and septic tank in Southern California. Those each run well over 30 grand. So, may as well buy a house with that price tag plus the cost of the tiny house. Second, don't even bother trying to live in a tiny house with one of those compostable toilets. That's what's really made me give up on the experience. Having to drain the 2-gallon pee jar every couple days was my form of hell. The smell, oh god, it haunts me. Also, never being able to sit up properly in our loft bedroom. Try folding clothes hunched over. All in all, it was an incredible experience and a fun year, but I would never in my life move into another tiny house. Maybe if we were in a populated space with a septic, maybe, and a real stove plus dryer. Even th. Nope, still wouldn't do it. Save it for a fun rental vacation type of thing. My parents live in a tourist destination and built one to rent out on Airbnb. They tell me it stays booked up most of the time. I stay in it when I go visit them, and it's pretty nice for staying a few nights in, but I don't think I'd want to live in one full time. Well, lived in a shoebox for a while out of necessity. It's a dark windowless room that's about the size of 3 twin beds. So you could imagine, You've a twin bed with very little storage then a bathroom. It's very different than some of the Craze, where you live on a plot of land or inside a van and have space, freedom and fresh air. I'd literally feel trapped in a box whenever I go home. TBH, it's a sad way of living. I'd miss a lot of simple essential things, like having a fridge or a stove, or a place to do laundry, or table. I end up living 1 year like this, but it really depresses me. Yes, in a way, I'd save up a lot in rent, but it's not worth it, and in reality not frugal at all. I end up spend way too much on eating out, entertainment and alcohols, laundry and not buying bulk due to space restraints. I was already living in a tiny house, Airstream trailer, because I was on tour with the circus for several years when the craze first started. Could not comprehend why people would want to do this. Things are much better now that I'm off the road. I bought my first house, or 3-bedroom on a corner lot, and love it. My dog can actually run around outside without a leash. I have flat walls on which to hang things. Every one of my earthly possessions doesn't have to fit, Tetris-like, into a space under my bed, or be velcroed in place for transit. I can take showers longer than 5 minutes. I can take baths. Take it from someone who has spent 6 years living in tiny house conditions professionally. It's miserable. Don't do it. The trailer is still parked in my backyard. Maybe I'll fix it up one day and sell it to my sister, who is still fixated on the tiny house movement. My wife and I bought a tiny place years ago, and it was great for us because it was affordable. No way we could have bought a traditional sized place at the time. It allowed us to get out of ever increasing rent and build equity, and it forced us to live, and consequently spend, more consciously because of the limited space. It was a great financial decision. Then, as tiny houses got trendy, they started getting expensive, which defeats the entire point. I'd still recommend it, but only if you're getting in cheap, not an expensive, boutique tiny space. Living in a classic tiny house on wheels here. I bought the unfinished frame several years back and now live in the finished 170 square feet, including the sleeping loft, house. There are pros and cons. It is not for everyone, but the shorter list of pros outweighs the cons for me. Pros: I have a house, my own house, no matter what. I greatly prefer living alone, and can for much less than I otherwise could. It is plenty of space for one person and minimalist possessions, though I've essentially lived in a tent, and I'm used to this lifestyle. It's cute AF and very homey. I can add a bit potentially down the road. Cons: instead of feeling greater freedom, I often feel less independent because I need help moving it, will probably be living on other people's property for a good while, etc. Sometimes it is a money sink, either due to maintenance, moving it, or expensive uncommon appliances breaking. There are all sorts of laws about where you can park it that I generally just ignore. It's a pain and major stress to move. I would never use it to travel. You have to keep things very clean and organized. I rent a separate studio for my work, and I have a yoga membership in part to have better longer showers, which add to any rent. Since I built it with off-grid in mind, it is not equipped to be hooked up to city utilities. Thus I have to be very thrifty with my water usage, so I don't have to fill up my water tank as oft. Will eventually change this. Actually, my wife and I, and 2 daughters, 3 and 5 years old, moved into a 40-foot RV for 5 years while I attended grad school. We wouldn't trade the experience for anything. We really had a lot of fun traveling and being outside. Admittedly, our experiment was made much more successful because we were living in Monterey, California, and the weather and surroundings offer dozens of different activities to do. Today we do live in a slightly larger than average home. Up until a few months ago, we still spent 3 to 4 months a year on the road and lived out of our motor home while I worked. Again, we miss these kinds of trips and adventures. From our perspective, living in tight places is comfortable, as long as it is optional. If we were forced to live like that, it might not be as fun. That said, my retirement plan includes living part-time in an RV, 6 to 9 months a year, and volunteering in the national park system. I look forward to embracing that lifestyle again. I lived in a storage pod hut for 7 months. It was the most glorious life experience ever. It was in Perrier, Utah, in the middle of Grand Escalade Monument, about 6 miles from the wave, 45 minutes from Antelope Canyon. Stepping outside was literally stepping out into the canyon landscape. I had limited Wi-Fi, 150 MB daily cap, watched movies on VCR, and illustrated shirt designs after a hard day's worth of ranch work. Disclaimer: bathroom and kitchen were separate buildings. Kinda like at a Koa campground. So my story is just a self-indulgent answer than it is answering the post. It's still a thing. Personally, I could easily live in one, but the toilet need to be connected to a sewer line. The whole composting toilet thing is a deal breaker for me. I live in a small studio and I've lived here since 1999, when I was 19. I make more money and could easily move, but being single, I don't really need the extra space. I like living minimal and being debt free. I've been in mine for 3 years now. Absolutely love it. No regrets whatsoever. Edit, added after I read other replies. Doesn't seem like anyone else who responded actually lives in one, so I'll add more about mine. Finished out our old hickory shed 3 years ago now. Took 4 months with just me and my dad working on it. Total cost, not including appliances I already had, was under $13K. It's very well insulated, and a single cadet wall heater keeps me nice and toasty. I designed the space, and I'm a Whole Foods, plant-based vegan, so most of the bottom floor is kitsch. I have full-sized appliances, a large stainless steel commercial prep table, another rack full of small appliances and my dry goods. The middle is all open, and I have 8 feet walls, so it feels very open and spacious. I have plenty of room to roll out my yoga mat. I sleep upstairs in a loft that I access by ladder. I'm only 42, so no problems there. I even take my 12-pound dog up there every night. My shower is a normal size, though smaller than average. I have a hot water tank and have plenty of hot water for a 20-minute shower. Not that I ever take one longer than 5 minutes or so. I'm on property owned by my parents. They lived on my old property for 7 or 8 years and are now returning the favor. My spot isn't legal, but our neighbors are all cool and 2 of them even have tiny houses as well. I'm hooked up to the water, electricity, cable and septic here. I love everything about it. I'm near Seattle, and in warmer months, I'm outside almost all of the time. I run year round and have a lot of friends and family in the area, plus I'm actively dating, so I'm not home all the time. When I am, I'm working. I've been self-employed for over 20 years now and work from home. I live in a 200 square foot house with 3 cats, 2 dogs, and my boyfriend. My house and 5 acres of land are paid off, and I don't have any bills. Life is good when you aren't in debt. It's the best decision I ever made. I'm so glad I didn't build a big house on my property, which is what I was planning on doing. The extra space is just not needed, which I didn't realize until I moved to the tiny house. It's easy to clean and maintain. Had a friend who was living with his wife in a rent-controlled apartment in Midtown Manhattan, and so he was paying something like $550 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment, which is insanely low for New York City. He and his wife got super into the tiny house craze, and so they decided to get rid of most of their non-essentials and moved into a tiny studio apartment. The studio apartment cost them $2,800 a month, and so even though they increased their rent by like 500%, they decided it was worth it as a big picture move to get rid of non-essentials and to live more modestly. The guy ended up knocking up his wife. They had a baby, tried living in their tiny studio, but found it impossible, so they had to move out to a 2-bedroom apartment, where they now pay something like $4,800 a month. So they went from having a 2 British rail apartment for $550 a month to now paying nearly $5,000 a month, just because they got a little too excited about a trend. I might be too late to the party, but I can actually answer this question. I currently rent out a tiny house in a rough trailer park. It's my last semester of college and I'll be living here for only 6 months. Honestly, I really love it. I've never had issues with small spaces, and I'm an extremely adaptable person, so the move from a 3-bed 3-bath townhome with roommates to the tiny home wasn't a problem for me. The layout is basically like a skinny studio apartment with a longer loft over the back half of the apartment where my queen-sized bed sits. There's another, smaller loft above the door for storage. I thought I would be annoyed with having to climb up a ladder to get to the bed, but it's really not that bad. I'm 5 minutes and 10 seconds and I don't have to duck at all. But when parents came to visit my 6 feet 2 inches dad had to duck his head to get through the front door. I also have a cat, and he loves in here. There's plenty of space for Hook to run and jump to, and from the loft. Things may get a little tight when my girlfriend comes by, but there's enough room to get by. That being said, I think I wouldn't love the layout of this tiny home if I were here for any longer than 6 months. I think it's key that, if you move into a tiny home, it's best to design it yourself with a layout you could really enjoy. My lease is up in a couple of months, but overall I thoroughly enjoyed this tiny home. My family has their own land, so I plan on buying a portion of it and building my own tiny home on my stake after I get settled with my career. Edit. Here's some pics of the inside when I moved in Imga, Comavosm 7. Okay, you ready for this bullshit? My sister and her husband are pretty crunchy granular people. She uses the word organic like it's a brand name. My sis is one of those big thinkers who is always coming up with a plan for some shit she wants to do with her life. Her husband is supremely cool and an incredible carpenter. Dude can build an entire house himself, more or less. At this point, they had 3 kids under 10 and a small dog. They spent $15k on a huge gooseneck trailer and another $20k to build a tiny house on it. Takes them about 3 years of Saturdays weekends to finish. Always talking about how great it's gonna be, etc etc. Keep in mind, it will end up being 185 sqft of living space after it has been furnished. With 3 children and a dog, they sold their 3500 sqft home and moved into the tiny house. 5 months later, they are buying another regular house because my sister is over it. On to the next big thing. I mean, why are we even talking about tiny homes? That's so 5 months ago.